So I found this old drawing in my house when we were moving, and I don't know when it's from, maybe 2012, I don't know. But I thought it'd be fun to redraw it and see what can be improved on and do a little video and kind of turn it into giving you some tips and tricks and see if maybe that's helpful. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm trying to post weekly videos, we'll see how that goes. And if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video, press that bell. So one of the first things you'll notice is that his shoulders and waist are very perpendicular, which makes them very static and not very dynamic. So we're gonna adjust that. And usually you're gonna want them to be pointing in opposite directions, and that just gives it a more balanced and dynamic feel to the pose. And there's also a lot of weird stuff happening with anatomy. I don't know what's going on with the cape. I don't know where the wind's coming from. It's kind of going all sorts of directions. The proportions are off. We've got a really tiny waist and then a torso and shoulders that are super, super broad. And I don't know what is happening with the face. The anatomy of the face is just like all over the place. I don't know. So the things we're going to look for are proportions, anatomy, realism, line weight, shadows, and then the curvature and contours of the form that you're drawing. These are all going to be really important. So here I'm just going over the basic gestures drawing, and I'm just kind of sculpting out the anatomy and just refining it and placing the anatomy where I want it to be, just to make sure the proportions are all correct and the pose is the way we want it to be before moving on. Here I'm just mapping out the proportions. Usually you can measure your proportions in terms of heads. So I think the shoulders should be about 3 heads wide if you're placing it vertically. And you can use that to measure the length of your arms, the length of the torso. And generally, as a rule, the top half of the body should be about the same length as the bottom half. So you can basically split the body in half and it should be symmetrical. Or I'll do another video that focuses completely on proportions, so we'll go a little bit more into that then. This is the stage of the drawing where I'm just kind of refining things and adding details like the cape, the mask, and the logo. And for these sorts of things, you want to keep in mind the contours of the body. So we don't want to just stick that logo on there completely straight and flat. We want it to bend with the curvature of the body. And the same goes for the gloves and the belt around his waist. You don't want those lines to be completely straight. You want to keep in mind your perspective and the shape of the form you're drawing. As you can see, I like to go over my sketch a lot of times. So here I'm just going over again, refining it even more. Just because with this one I'm going to go straight from the sketch to inks, so I really want to make sure that everything is where I want it to be, and that I'm not going to be like guessing or anything when I'm going with the inks. I want to be pretty confident there, so. Alright, now we are going in with inks. I'm doing this in Clip Studio, and for the inks I'm using a mix of the G pen for kind of outlining the form, and then the Milli pen for rendering, and for some lines that I just kind of want to make a little bit more dynamic. So I'm not going to cover the whole inking process. I will do a completely different video on that with some tips for inking. So I'm just including part of it, and yeah. So here's the finished drawing. As you can see, I've touched up the proportions, I've looked at references to touch up the anatomy and make sure it's, for the most part, I hope, in the right places. I've used a light source to create some darker shadows, just to give it a bit more of a gritty and realistic feel.